welcome everyone. We are live. It is Wednesday. We're having our guest tonight, Chris Burnett, is having some technical issues, so we are here to talk about issues of the day. And Mark, let's just start with my favorite stalking horse. What is the matter with Ward 8 in the District of Columbia?
Well, we were just talking. I've just elected Trayvon
Yeah.
White, who had. Well, I guess it's interesting. He hasn't been convicted yet, but he has been charged with bribery. So he's got another criminal case coming up. This apparently, but he's had other issues in the past. So the entire city council threw him off. They voted him off because of bribery allegations or what have you, which bodies can do. The problem for the council is that White ran in the race to replace himself and ended up replacing himself, and so he's, I guess, going back to the council.
Yeah, it just seems to me that, as Dwight was sort of referring to, the reputation of the ward to re-elect this guy, bring him back to office when, yeah, I mean,
Well, remember that they also elected Marion Barry represented Ward 8
yeah,
too.
I know that's what I'm referring to as well.
Yeah, but it's important to remember. I mean, Ward 8 is, I think it's fair to say, the ward with a chip on its shoulder. They talk about it's across. I don't think all of it is, but the base of the ward is across the Anacostia River in southeast.
Home to some of the best charter schools in D.C.
That they are the stepchild of D.C. and so Marion Barry and obviously the Councilman White now have really been able to tap into the resentment that the people in the ward have of, being part of Washington, D.C. and forever being kind of looked down upon, scoffed, not getting the resources, fill in the blanks of what that means. And as politicians, they've been able to tap into that kind of us against them feeling.
Yeah, but to elect,
but
but let me say something nice, Mark, about the District of Columbia.
I thought I was saying something nice.
No, I'm about to say something even nicer. I'm about to say something nicer than that. Even I must give credit to.
You're about to slip the knife in now. I know, but go ahead.
I must give credit where credit is due. He has been expelled twice already from the council, and he's probably going to be expelled again. And bravo to the council for doing that. But come on, can you not find somebody to beat him in a primary?
Yeah, I mean, it's a black eye. It's an embarrassment in a sense, that you got a guy who's on the take. And put him in office.
Again, that he's been charged
allegedly on the take.
Yes, allegedly on the take. I obviously his fellow council member must have felt it was fairly convincing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
These are the same. Well, not the some. Well, Phil Mendelssohn's been around since the Marion Barry days. Yeah. They never took these actions against Marion Barry when he was the mayor.
But you know what? I'll also remind you guys: you can never trust a DC jury. So no matter what you're charged with, the politics of it, you might be able to get away with it.
Yeah. But they have taken action against other council members. I mean, there has.
Yes, they have. Like, who is that other guy? He was like from upper Northwest, like the Cherry Chase area. I'm trying to think of his name.
So, folks from Maryland and Virginia probably should not be opining on Washington, D.C. politics. But yes, you're right.
And hey, Dave, you guys have an election. How's it looking for Winsome Sears? Is she going to pull it out?
Well, I was at an event with her, a fundraiser. It was coming on 2 weeks now, and I gotta say, she gave the best speech that I've heard her give. I thought she did the best I've ever seen her. So I'm a little nervous about the race, in part because one of the ironclad rules of Virginia politics is the party in the White House, because we have off-year elections. The next year, we always seem to lose the governor's mansion. It's been that case my entire life except one time. So we got some headwinds against us. But I think she's got a shot. We've got John Reed's doing great as our lieutenant governor candidate. And Jason Miyares is running for re-election.
And he really is the future of the RPV, frankly, Jason Morales.
I think so. Jason's good. So hopefully we can hold Jason because he's done a good job as Attorney General. He's got a certain incumbency, so you think he might be the strongest, even if it's a bad night for us. I've been hearing good things about John Reed, and I don't follow the polling too much because I don't necessarily trust it. But I think there was a recent poll that had him up. He was the one candidate we had up. I know at least him was up, but I don't know. It's hard to say, and it is early. But Spanberger did a great job creating this image of her as the moderate Democrat. She's done a great job with that, even though the reality is she's a straight when she in the House, a straight Democrat vote, really. But she's crafted that moderate image, and Virginians like their moderate Democrats, believe it or not. Historically, moderate Democrats have been able to do well in Virginia, but
we'll do
see.
Virginians remember that the previous governor campaigned as a moderate?
That's true. That's right.
Mr. Infanticide?
Yep. Part of it, I think, for Northam is, remember, he got compromised with his past. His past came out, and to save himself, I theorize, and I wrote a whole book about it, I theorize that he had to move to the left. He needed the left-wing flank. And in the era of Trump, remember, Democrats retook the legislature, and they had at least one socialist. So Northam gave in on everything, really, but the legislature was even worse than it's ever been. I say he gave in on everything. There's one exception. The lefties had a bill that basically made it impossible to almost pull anybody over, even if your lights weren't working. And so Northam didn't sign that. I think Northam said, well, I can't sign that bill. But he basically signed everything they gave him. And I don't know if I ever told you guys this story, but one of the ways I knew Northam was so bad is one night I was coming home from work, and it was like 12 o'clock, and behind me was a cop, and he pulled me over, and I didn't know why I got pulled over. It turns out I had a rear light out. I just got a warning. But before he left, he then said, I have to ask you a few survey questions. And then it was probably written by the ACLU, but he asks me, now, what gender do you identify as? Of course, I'm a male, and it says it on the license, but do you identify as a non-Hispanic white male? And he had to give me these survey questions. So all it was is the light was out. I got pulled over because the light was out. Nothing else was relevant, but yet he still had to ask me these survey questions. So that's how bad of a governor Northam was, and how bad the legislature was if they passed these social justice type bills. But
yeah. And by the way, Mark, you can rest easy. Governor Westmore has streamlined the form process for state benefits now. For anyone, he's reduced it from 80 hours to 28 minutes to get your benefits forms done. I'd be more enthusiastic if he had done that at the MVA. Sped up the MVA lines.
Right. So we have Ben Jealous has lost his job apparently at
Sierra
Club. He was, of course, the Democratic nominee in 2018. Had been head of the NAACP, and I gather from press accounts, I don't know, but had a rocky tenure there. But he seems to have a rocky tenure at the Sierra Club. So, Dwight, what do you think that says about what kind of a manager he would have been? Had he
we
been
dodged a bullet as one of our articles we've had this week talking about this very situation on Direct Line News. We dodged a bullet. Maryland dodged a bullet in 2018 when we re-elected Larry Hogan. Can you imagine this clown? He would have made Westmore look like a rocket scientist. And that's how bad this guy's managerial skills are.
We have rocket scientists in Maryland too. So that's
right.
Yes, we do. I work with a lot of them sometimes. But I mean, I think the big thing we dodged a bullet. Thank God everyone voted for Larry Hogan in 18.
Yeah.
And yeah, this, I mean, I wish more people would know most Democrats are incompetent managers. You know why they are that way, Mark? They've never run a lemonade stand in their life or mowed somebody else's lawn. They have they don't have the first clue about small business or
Well,
managing time and
yeah, and
money.
look at New York. They're going to elect a good example of what you're saying. Look who they're going to possibly elect as mayor.
Yes, elitist, communist, socialist.
Yes.
So that actually is a fascinating thing to talk about because the demographics of the constituency that elected this guy in or chose him in the primary is a complete 180 of what you expect as the quote socialist constituency. It is
Yeah.
a it is a upper income areas. It was really expensive areas that or where housing and apartment or housing in general is fairly expensive. That went heavily for him,
Yeah.
and the more working class areas of the city basically stuck with Cuomo.
Yeah.
And it is a reflection of this growing trend that we're seeing of this very well educated, but also upper income area.
He did
Of
very well on the Upper East Side, by the way. Upper East Side, Mondami did very well.
Yeah, yeah, well, exactly. That's what we're talking about.
You
Is
Yeah.
that the
know,
upper income areas are doing that, and of course it's for those of us a certain age. I mean, going back, the assumption was always that economic class was a kind of determinant of
yeah.
political orientation. In the 21st century, we're seeing that increasingly turned on its head.
Yeah. The left used to use economics, but now it's more identity politics and
Yeah.
sort of their woke
And
ideology.
here's a question for both of you guys. What does Elizabeth Warren, Rachel Dolezal, and Jessica Krug all have in common?
They're all Native Americans.
Well, they all claim to be something they weren't,
Yeah,
but
just like Mamdami, they all
That's
are
right.
having an identity crisis.
Oh,
Mamdani
lied on the
thinks he's
form like an application to say you're
yeah,
a.
Mamdani thinks he's African American. Liz Warren said,
She's a Native American.
yeah, and Rachel Dolezal thought she was black,
Yeah.
and Jessica Krug from Kansas said she was from the Congo. You know, what is with these Democrats? I don't understand
It's
why.
it's identity politics. They want to associate themselves with an aggrieved group.
Okay,
right.
I mean, here's the thing. Much as Mamdani, who is he's his family was in Tanzania, and by the way, I know a little bit about Indians living in Tanzania. By the way, Mark,
Actually, I
my
think it was wasn't it Uganda?
Uganda, Uganda,
Right.
and I'll tell you this because my dad's uncle was in Uganda, and the stories I've heard, they were basically just running the front operation for the empire. They're basically just minding the store for the empire uh, over there. So I don't think they were quite as cool with the natives as they think. And you know why?
Well, I don't think he's saying he has not said that. I mean, and this, the, but you're touching on I think a very key point, which is there's
Yeah.
a certain level of guilt. This sort of this settler hostility, which
Yeah.
And there
I
was a
think
reason.
nobody had a
Self-loathing, really.
self-loathing
Yeah.
of this kind of guilt of having had this experience of again moving from one area and in which let me go back in Uganda the Indian population was a very small group
Yeah.
but as you
That
said was
was, yeah.
economically dominant.
And remember, Idi Amin
Right.
was committing genocide against,
Right. Well, yeah, no, it
you
forced them
know,
out and they became the scapegoat. So it's an interesting dynamic and the Mandami's family. I
yeah.
won't get all the chronology of when what happened when, but left that and came to the United States, but have that heritage of having been this sort of I think you put your finger on it, Dwight, kind of colonial overlord
Yeah.
from one
Yeah,
part of the empire to another
Yeah.
part of the empire.
yeah.
Role.
Well, and
They
yeah, the other thing about him is that he and AOC, for that matter, they grew up fairly affluent, upper middle class. They were
he
well
was more
struggled.
than upper middle class. He was
Was-
rich.
Okay, yeah,
His mother was a Disney Channel executive or something like
yeah,
that. That's how he got. He was a rapper, you know,
yeah.
and he.
But
I
that's
mean,
the other
But
reason they may buy into socialism because they've never really had to struggle. And so
mhm.
if you never had to struggle, I mean, you can believe in all kinds of theoretical things about economics or about people or about human relations.
I
If you
had
live in the
a
real world, it may be different.
I had a great professor at GW, Dick Thornton. We were talking about post colonialism and where actually this was about about revolution. He goes, revolutions are never really done by the peasants. It's usually the elitists who want more, who basically want the power. That base
Yeah,
and the peasants are just the cannon fodder to rise up and the power and to a point he was very correct on the fact that revolutions seldom really change things for the poorest of the poor.
yeah,
All it does is change the front office. Even my granddad said that about when the empire left India. He goes, nothing really. He goes, if you were just an average Indian doing your job in India, your life did not change at all. Let's say if you were a engineer, you basically woke up the next morning and instead of working for a British company, you're working for an Indian company now. That's an engineer, or probably still working for that same British company because they didn't go anywhere. So I mean, revolutions, and where am I going with all of this with Mandami? Is this is just nothing more than suburban guilt, as they used to call it in the '60s and '70s, white guilt,
right. And it's
and
also
this is just
trendy. It's also
this is
trendy,
affluent guilt. This is just
and
affluent guilt.
it's academically trendy, and it's sort of in the vogue
Uh,
at this time. It's like when I
see,
was a kid.
I want to push back on that a little bit because I think you're perhaps underestimating the significance of the pivot that we're seeing.
mhm,
We're also seeing the reverse side of um, you know uh, frankly, a lot of Hispanics. We looked at the numbers. If you do a comparison of by ethnic group and by category, how Trump did between 2020 and 2024, we've seen some very dramatic shifts. So we've kind of seen the world flip around, where some traditional groups that were more Republican have switched, and then the opposite has happened, and a
yeah.
corresponding
I mean,
change.
your article from June 16th says it all. On the shifting voters to the GOP.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
it's this sort of intelligentsia class
mhm,
that is somewhat disaffected because one of the things I think I describe is there's a kind of almost class consciousness. These are not the billionaires or certainly the billionaires or the millionaires, but they feel as though they ought to be running things, and
mhm,
so there's a kind of conflict. Um, and in New York too, there are a lot of people who end up going to New York, and it's sort of like going to Hollywood. You're going to become a star, and it's interesting when you look at the actual numbers. There are a lot of people who get into entry level jobs. There are entry level jobs in law firms, but maybe only 1 in 10 associates. Maybe some firms, maybe 1 in 5, but 1 in 10 becomes a partner. So,
mhm,
or managing, if it's in investment banking, there's only a small percentage or what have you. And so there are a lot of people who are going into what is really kind of an economic rat race. And I could go on field after field where there are a lot of these entry level jobs that kind of funnel out at the top to a very narrow
Mm,
one.
yeah,
As I wrote about in Direct Line News, um, um, uh, you know, the costs are very high in New York.
Yeah.
Is really astronomical, and so the ability to be able to pay is a real challenge.
Well, what I would say, if I may, I agree with you in that I think the affordability crisis is real, and I think it is true that people are very frustrated with their status in life, that they work hard and they don't seem to be able to get ahead. I get all that.
Right.
My thinking though is that the solutions that Mandami or an AOC or Sanders would have would only make it worse. They're not
Oh,
going to make it better.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, without by kind of trying to get a better handle on what the source of this is, it goes without saying the solution. I mean, their solution would be to, among other things, to get rid of college debt and forgive
Yeah,
all that and make college free going forward.
yeah.
Which,
But
Yeah,
I will say this. I couldn't afford to live in New York. And not only that, I couldn't even park a car in New York. I don't even think I can afford that. So
right.
um it is very expensive. But I mean, part of the reason it's expensive is because, well, Democrats have been running it all my life. So they might want to look at that. But I think the affordability crisis is real. So I don't dispute that.
Well,
Dave. Forget New York. Imagine if you were working. When we were working at NET Free Congress, we were making barely $40,000 a year in
Yeah,
1998.
yeah, that's right.
You
Right.
know, and people complain today when they're making. I mean, for living on 40 and paying bills and living in DC, I want to
Yeah.
say an apartment on Capitol Hill is about $1,200-$1,500 almost.
so one of our writers wrote about the rent in New York. And
Yes.
I had to double check it just to when I saw it, but the median rent is $5,500 a month, and that's
Wow.
not just an
Why don't they just
expensive.
buy a house on Long Island? That's a mortgage payment.
Well, actually,
I
Long
guess
I
you
mean,
can't really I guess it's also that maybe you can't buy at some point, so you're kind of stuck
right,
in
right,
rent.
right.
'Cause,
But
Um,
yeah.
but Marx makes a good point. It shows you the serious problem in New York if your rent's that high.
no,
That's
it's interesting. I don't know that this would solve it, but there is one problem in with the rental market. It's
yeah,
fascinating. So there has been there always for since the 40s have been a system of rent control and now what they call rent stabilization.
yeah,
And one of the reforms that had gone in was a system that said that if a landlord made substantial improvements, depending they would define what improvements qualified, they could increase the rent by I think it was like whatever that cost is by 1/60th. So basically over a 5-year basis, that would be the increase. And of course, that encouraged landlords to upgrade and maintain buildings. They obviously they have over decades they end up going through wear and tear. And in 2018, when the Democrats took over the Senate, which had been Republican forever and ever and ever, and had created a certain level of balance in New York State, in 2019, legislation was passed that basically eliminated this process for allowing for recovery of capital improvements that landlords made. And what's happened since then is that a lot of apartments, when they come on, sort of they come vacant, landlords haven't re-rented them because they can't afford with the increase in rent because the rent is so low and they can't increase it. They can't afford to make the improvements and it's not marketable if they don't.
yeah.
So the estimates I've seen suggest that there are 100,000 apartments that are off the market that are in states of disrepair within buildings.
Right.
Um, and that doesn't even get to the issue of if you don't allow for high enough rents, it's the disincentive to be able to.
And just that alone, Mark, probably would bring down overall rents. Just what
Sure.
you said is probably put that
Right.
on. Yeah,
Well, and I think all that basically like the rent is high. Also, you notice the regulations have also gone up too. Like for landlords, you got to paint. I mean, it all costs money. Painters aren't cheap. You got to do this. You got to, and that's also, has to. And also, let's not forget Joe Biden and the Biden administration did all they could. They are one of the leading contributors to the cost of rent being too high, frankly, with inflation spiking during the Biden administration.
It makes you wonder, how could Felix and Oscar have afforded the nice Park Avenue apartment they had?
Well,
He's a
wasn't one of them
sports
like a
writer.
right?
He was a
Was it?
photographer. He was a photographer.
Yeah, but he was I'm sure they both got paid well, frankly.
I guess, but that's a nice apartment. They were there on Park Avenue.
Well, I mean, look,
Sure.
Lucy and Ricky lived on the Upper East Side.
He was a band leader.
Brownstone.
And
She
was a homemaker. He was a band leader.
Yeah, and
yeah.
And they were paying $200 a month on rent.
Was that it? To
Fred
and Ethel.
Yeah, and they had a few bucks. I mean,
yeah.
But I mean, rent.
Well, but you put your finger on is that one of the things that the control system does is you get into an apartment a zillion years ago,
Yeah.
And the increase can only go up. So it creates a situation where compared with, say, Northern Virginia or Maryland, the turnover of apartments is very low because people are very reluctant to give up apartments because it becomes a kind of almost property right to be able to sit in an apartment. The apartment may be going downhill, but the rates aren't going up.
A good example of this is, good example is Alistair Cook. Can you remember Alistair Cook? Alistair Cook was the British writer. Well, anyway, he was in a rent-controlled apartment in New York. And a lot of people pointed that out, that he had that, like Mark was saying, he wasn't going to leave. He had a good grandfathered-in deal. So despite the money and fame, he's in a rent-controlled apartment in New York, in effect.
So this creates a premium when an apartment is able to come back on the market. Those vacancies end up getting priced at a premium. And again, that's, who are the people who come into that? It's that constituency that we've been talking about from Endowment, the young worker who's in a knowledge industry of some kind and is well paid, but is also having to pay through pay a lot for rent. But it isn't just that. I mean, everything else is costly.
Yep. Yeah.
And I think one of the moving away from just rent, I think one of the problems I want to talk about is, I want to give some advice to our friends at the Democrat Party who seem to, they're trying to rebrand and they're just taking the old thing and rebranding the exact same package they had with Kamala in a new package and calling it Gavin Newsom. They really need to be listening to the James Carvels of their party, frankly.
I absolutely agree. I think one of the challenges they've got is that because their agenda, or their agenda is the wrong word, argument, or their case, if you will, has been, Trump is bad. And that was the unifying message for.
And remember, that was our message in 1996. Clinton bad, Dole good, Dole lost.
Right, and so there are all these people who said, yeah, you know what, I've seen Trump. I know what you're doing. I don't buy it. We'll move on. But fast forward, because that's been the message, it's been very difficult for them to come up with constructive proposals on policy, because they really don't want to. I would argue they really don't want to publicly argue about net zero. They want to talk about dealing with climate change, and they want to but they don't want to talk about the specific policies that they want as a result of climate change. They kind of want to slip that in. It's very hard. We could go on to other as well, but it's been very hard for them to come back with concrete policies
Mhm.
because, again, the unifying message is Trump is bad.
And here's the thing about, and you mentioned climate change. I gotta bring up their prophet Al Gore and their Bible, "An Inconvenience Truth." According to Al Gore, we should all be dead because didn't he say when he wrote that book that by 2010 or something will be under Manhattan will be underwater, Florida will be underwater. I go to Florida fairly regularly. It's not underwater at all.
It's a little like the Trump is bad. It's the forever the catastrophication that
And I think
um,
nobody's. It's
It's
like the
mixing science with politics. Your science and your ideology put together, and it's not a good
and
idea.
it's like the little boy that cried wolf. That's why these claims of racism don't work anymore. Every time the Democrats call a Republican a racist, it's like the little boy that cried wolf. It's like that little boy also cries, you know, apocalypse about the environment, climate change, global warming, global cooling, and it's not working. They need to go back to fundamentals. They need to go back to grassroots. They need to talk about tax cuts. They need to talk about balanced budgets. That's our position. They've never talked about balanced budgets or
Has
because
tax.
either one of you read the Abundance book by was it Ezra Klein? I haven't read the book, but it sounds interesting. It's kind of like a moderate Democrat view.
it's interesting, and it's also been fascinating to see. So let me summarize what it is. It's this
Okay,
idea that what Democrats should advocate is creating more of things, that
right.
getting rid of regulations and getting rid of impediments and allowing for sort of investments to take place. And so housing gets built and roads get built and um, basically kind of free up a lot of regulation that they identify as kind of getting in the way of progress and identifying the party as being supportive of that. And what's fascinating is the pushback you see to this quote unquote abundance argument of, oh, wait a second, you're not talking about redistribution. You're not talking about, and then it's this kind of checklist of various interest group positions that says, wait a second, that's that anyway. So that's been the challenge that they've had. Um, I mean, we could talk about the abundance thing. I'm not quite sure. You know, at a very high level, it's kind of interesting, but then you get into the very specifics of are you really talking about allowing for dreaded fossil fuels to be used? I'm not quite sure that's part of the abundance agenda, but obviously some people would say that's exactly the kind of deregulation that has made things more affordable,
Hmm.
has made America an energy center and an energy exporter. To the surprise of absolutely every expert 30 years ago. Um, so that I think sometimes in the details they kind of get lost on that. But anyway, it is interesting, and it's creditable as a possible way of kind of taking them out of the agenda, if you will.
Yeah, it seems to
Back
me that
to,
that's the approach Democrats should try to go after, and not, as you just said, the redistributionist model.
right.
And I think one of the things is one their fear mongering just is not working. People are not buying what they're selling, frankly.
Could I go back something we wrote again? I want to we got
Sure.
to right. We got to really push direct line news.
Yes, our
So
Substack.
it's our Substack. So I want to kind of go back to something I wrote about 4 weeks ago that I found frankly fascinating. That's why I wrote about it. Is that this huge divide that exists with new Americans, so naturalized citizens that are voting for the first time, or I shouldn't say voting for the first time, that are now eligible voters, and the dramatic swing that has taken place between 2016, 2020 to 2024 to the point that now these new Americans, again, naturalized citizens that are voting, they vote like the rest of the country. It's only like about 4 or 5% more less Republican. I mean, basically they've kind of moved to the center, what have you. And what's fascinating is one of the drivers of that has been the left. The Democrats have tried to lump illegal immigrants and legal immigrants all into one big category
Yeah.
and treat illegals as simply, a category of immigrants.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it has touched off an apparent. I mean, looking at the numbers and kind of diving into the crosstabs, it's driven a huge resentment. That wait a second, I followed the rules. I didn't come across the border, or maybe I was separated from my family for a number of years while I went through the various steps. Obviously, there's a fairly complicated system to come into the country illegally. It's not. It can be it can be quite challenging. But created some kind of resentment that somehow immigrants was this new category that was going to reflect both categories together. And these are people who were very, very proud of the fact that they did it legally.
Yeah.
So
I agree. I used to teach citizenship for Catholic Charities, and I would get the same thing. I was dealing with people who were coming through the legal system,
right.
and from their standpoint, that you can't really lump them together with someone who overstays visa here illegally. They're very different types of folks, and so yeah, you can't really put them together for a number of different reasons.
Well, Mark, we are at. I want to do a couple of plugs before we
Yes.
say goodbye and go to Missoni's.
Do you know
First,
somebody? Do you know somebody who's written a book recently that you would like to
yeah,
recommend?
exactly. Yes, I do. And here is his book, and I think everyone should go buy it on Amazon. And better yet, come out to our fundraiser with Governor Ehrlich on July 30th in Bethesda, Maryland. Meet the governor, get an autographed copy of his book right there. 6:30 to 9. Tickets are a low price at $55. But if you bring a friend, it's only going to cost you $50 because couples tickets are $100 each. So come one, come all.
I was going to say, I bought my ticket. Did I miss out on a deal? No, it's okay.
No. And you're welcome to buy a.
I am looking. I'm looking forward. And let me just say that Bob's written. Governor Ehrlich has written a number of books about Trump. It is very insightful. He's not. It's interesting. It's so many of the books are either, raw cheerleader books or completely hostile and what have you.
Yeah.
And
this is one of our. Yeah.
What Governor Ehrlich is a really good analyst, and I think it does the topic really well by kind of a balanced discussion of it. And so I'd be honest with you, I haven't read this because I'm waiting to get my book on the 30th. But his prior books in the series have been really insightful.
And if you want, don't take our word for it. We've got 3 great reviews about the book on our Montgomery County Republican Club website, as well as the Substack. The latest one from Jacob Silver, Upper East Side Republican. How'd that happen? How do you go and be an Upper East Sider and be a Republican? I need to ask him about that one.
I founded a Republican club in Brownstone, Brooklyn, which is now the heart of the Manani movement, but
some of the
not the Republicans. We're the ones who got outvoted.
Some of the smartest, best conservatives I ever met went to Harvard. So.
Hey, remember a lot of, if you think about it, right? Milton Friedman was a Keynesian. You've got Hayek was a socialist in the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay. Like Friedman was a Keynesian, but then again, I think a lot of the country was a
obviously
Keynesian.
known, not as a Keynesian. He's not known for that.
Yeah, no, he's not known. But my point is this: some of our best conservatives are the ones that are reformed. Ronald Reagan was a Democrat, and he was the greatest Republican we've had in our generation. I think
Whittaker Chambers was a communist.
Yes, he was. And Alger Hiss was a communist. Thank you, President Nixon.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
But anyways, we are, and then we have there's the Maryland GOP cookout this weekend. You can buy tickets at mdgop.org. But if you bring something like a bag of chips, it's only going to cost you $20. You know, so
I
otherwise
wouldn't
tickets are
describe
$40
it
each.
quite that way, bag of
No, I
chips.
mean they say you bring a dish, you know, a dish.
I think you're supposed to bring a dish, not a bag of chips.
Well, that's the same thing, you know. It's
If
like
it's Dwight Patel, we know what he would bring.
pizza.
So
He'd
when
bring a pizza pie.
so when you say bring a dish, you're not talking about a pretty woman. Sorry.
There
There you go.
you go. You know, I can see Jerry Cave doing a little joke, or Robin Ficker doing a joke on that. Here's my dish.
Expression. You know, the young people probably wouldn't know that, but that's an old term we used to use when I was a kid. So
No, that was before you were a kid, because
I guess, yeah, I guess. But
it was more like maybe your granddad's days.
yeah, maybe my parents' days, maybe. So
But that's pretty much how things are. I'll meet you guys at Miss Sony's. Take care. Good night, everyone.
see you guys.
Bye.
Let's go down to Missoni's, where Italian cuisine shines. Let's go down to Missoni's, we'll have a good old time. Homemade pasta at Missoni's, sauce is fresh